You know that feeling when you leave a meeting and realize the same few people did pretty much all the talking.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you had an idea, like bubbling up, but the moment just passed and you never actually shared it.
Definitely. We've all been there, I think.
Well, today we're plunging into something really fascinating. It's about how the language we use, often, without even thinking about it, acts like this invisible dial.
An invisible dial. I like that.
Yeah, either amplifying some voices or, well, unintentionally turning others way down.
That's exactly right. We're drawing on some really sharp insights today from Phoenix Performance Partners. They did this work on language that invites all voices,
Okay.
and they've really pinpointed something critical. These subtle ways we communicate. They can create these unintentional barriers,
Hmm.
basically determining who feels truly heard and, whose contributions just get lost in the shuffle. Have you ever noticed that in a team you're part of?
Oh, absolutely. All the time. And it's not just about, like, team harmony, is it?
No, not at all.
The numbers around this are actually, well, they're kind of staggering. Think about organizations potentially missing out on huge leaps in productivity.
Billions, potentially.
Right. Because of these unbalanced conversations, studies show that when you foster communication where everyone feels they can contribute,
Yeah.
you see something like an 87% improvement in decision
Like
making
Diz percent.
and a 45% boost in innovation. It really makes you wonder, what collective brilliance we're just leaving on the table sometimes.
It does. So much potential just untapped.
So our goal today, our mission for this deep dive, is to really get under the skin of these patterns,
What?
figure out how they work in practice,
Mm-hmm.
and most importantly, give you, our listeners, some concrete, actionable techniques you can start using like right away to cultivate more inclusive and ultimately more productive conversations in your own teams.
Okay, let's dive into this idea then. Language as an invisible gatekeeper. Such a vivid way to think about it, isn't it?
It really is.
It's not just the dictionary definition of our words, but the whole ecosystem of how we interact.
the whole ecosystem.
Right. Yeah, who gets airtime, the rhythm of the conversation, even
Mhm.
the kinds of questions that get asked. Picture this. You walk into a room where everyone's speaking your language, basically,
Okay.
but it's peppered with local slang and inside jokes you don't quite grasp. Even though you understand the basics, you might, well, hesitate to jump in, right?
That's such a relatable image. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that feeling of being sort of on the periphery.
Exactly.
And Phoenix Performance Partners, they highlight research from MIT's Human Dynamics Lab.
Oh, yeah, that research is fascinating.
Isn't it? It found these very patterns of interaction, who speaks to whom, for how long, how often. They're really strong predictors of a team's overall success.
Strong predictors, not just minor factors.
Right. And what's so interesting is how much of this happens just below the surface. We're generally not trying to exclude anyone, usually.
No, it's often unconscious.
But our ingrained communication habits can inadvertently do just that. For you, the listener, who's clearly keen on understanding team dynamics, this reveals a hidden but, wow, incredibly powerful force at play in every single group interaction.
And as the source material points out, these exclusionary patterns, they're rarely like big dramatic confrontations.
Right, it's not shouting matches.
No, exactly. Instead, they often show up as subtle, almost unconscious habits. Take specialized jargon, for example.
Okay, jargon.
Within a close-knit team,
Hmm.
using acronyms and technical terms might seem like efficient shorthand. Totally normal, right?
Yeah, seems efficient.
But if you're collaborating with someone from, say, a different department or maybe a new team member,
Uh-huh.
throwing around unexplained terms like maybe GAC and LTV, if you're in marketing talking to finance.
Right, customer acquisition cost and lifetime value if you don't know them.
Exactly. If you don't know them, it instantly creates this inside-outsider divide. It's like a subtle signal. Not everyone's part of the same club here.
That makes sense. Imagine a project team, marketing folks tossing around KPIs and ROAS without checking if the engineers or, say, the HR rep fully get the context.
Yeah.
It's a linguistic barrier, really. It
Yeah.
can make people feel less confident about contributing, even if they actually have really valuable insights to offer.
It totally can.
Hmm.
And another really common area is the dynamic of interrupters and, well, conversation dominators.
Ah, yes.
The interrupters.
The research here is quite revealing, actually. For instance, studies have shown this tendency for men to interrupt women more often than they interrupt other men, and for senior leaders to interrupt more junior colleagues more frequently.
That rings true.
Think about a brainstorming session. If one or two individuals consistently jump in before others can even finish their thoughts,
Yeah.
You're inevitably going to miss out on perspectives from those who might be a bit more reserved, or maybe who just feel they won't get a chance to be heard anyway. What are some of the unintended consequences you see from that? Well, it's almost as if the interrupter, maybe without meaning to, kind of sets the conversational agenda, right?
Yeah, they steer it.
And then there's what the text calls status reinforcing language. These are those little linguistic cues we use.
The subtle ones.
Yeah, that subtly elevate certain contributions based on who said them rather than, the actual value of the idea itself.
Precisely. Things like saying, oh, as Jane mentioned earlier, when maybe Jane just echoed someone else's point from 5 minutes before.
Right, or didn't even originate it.
Or offering really effusive praise like, great point, John, for an idea, while similar suggestions from others get a more, well, neutral nod.
Hmm. Listener, have you ever noticed those subtle differences? How contributions are received. It's a fascinating, almost subconscious dance of status.
It really is.
Hmm.
It's interesting to consider how these subtle cues can reinforce existing hierarchies, often completely unintentionally. It kind of highlights this deep-seated human tendency to, well, gravitate towards established power structures.
Absolutely. And then there's this concept of selective questioning. That Harvard Business School research they mention is quite thought-provoking.
Yeah, that one stood out.
Apparently, leaders can unconsciously direct more probing, open-ended questions to people they see as higher status,
Uh-huh. The important people?
while maybe posing more closed, like yes or no type questions to others.
It creates a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if you ask someone a more challenging open question, you're giving them the floor, the opportunity to showcase their expertise,
Ah.
which then reinforces the perception that they are high status.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, someone who only gets procedural questions, did you finish that report,
Yeah,
might feel like their deeper insights aren't really valued or even wanted.
that makes perfect sense. Imagine if you made a conscious effort to ask, say, the most junior person in the room, the same kind of open-ended, thought-provoking questions you'd ask a senior leader.
Right. The shift in the conversation, the insights you might uncover,
Yeah.
could be remarkable. It makes you think about the kind of diverse perspectives that lead to such a big jump, like that 87% better decision-making. Are we talking about challenging assumptions that would otherwise just go unchecked?
Exactly. And finally, the last pattern here, dismissive responses. These are like the verbal equivalent of slamming the door on someone's contribution,
Oof. Yeah.
instantly making them less likely to speak up again, in the future. Voices like, yes, but, or immediately jumping to identify all the potential problems with a new idea.
The example the text uses is so powerful.
Mm.
Someone tentatively puts forward an idea, maybe feeling a bit vulnerable. And the immediate reaction is, nah, we tried that before and it didn't work.
Ugh, deflating.
Totally. Even if it's factually accurate, the way it's delivered can be incredibly deflating. It can just shut down that person's willingness to contribute again. It's almost like saying, your idea isn't even worth considering.
So, okay, we've laid out these often hidden, often subtle patterns of communication. But why should we, as individuals and organizations, really care about all this beyond just being, nice? What's the tangible impact here?
Well, the text makes a really compelling argument for the bottom line benefits. It's
Oh.
not just fluff.
Okay.
Those statistics we mentioned earlier, the 87% better decision-making,
Yeah.
the 71% higher employee engagement, the reduced risk of groupthink, and that pretty impressive 45% higher innovation rate.
Those aren't small numbers.
Not at all. These aren't just abstract figures. They're the result of studies showing the real-world advantages of having communication environments where, a diverse range of voices are genuinely heard and valued.
So it really boils down to accessing your full talent pool, doesn't it?
Exactly. If you're only hearing consistently from a small segment of your team, you're essentially leaving this vast reservoir of potential untapped.
It's like having a team full of incredibly talented individuals, but you're only really listening to a select few. You're limiting your own potential for growth and innovation.
Precisely. The analogy they use of an orchestra where only the brass section plays.
Yeah, I like that.
It's so apt. You might get some loud sounds, sure, but you're missing out on the richness, the subtlety, the different textures and harmonies that come from all the instruments playing together in concert. When you inadvertently silence voices through these communication patterns, you're significantly limiting the range and, frankly, the quality of your organization's music.
Okay, this all resonates. We definitely understand the challenge now. So let's move on to what we can actually do about it. Phoenix Performance Partners provide some really practical strategies for shifting these ingrained communication patterns.
Yes. And this is where it gets really actionable.
The first area focuses on creating more deliberate conversational structures.
This is absolutely crucial because, as they point out, in unstructured conversations, those more dominant voices, they just tend to naturally take over. It's almost gravitational. So introducing structure really helps to create a more level playing field. They suggest simple techniques like starting meetings with round robins.
Round robins. Okay, explain that.
Yeah, where everyone gets a designated brief opportunity to speak on a topic before it's opened up for a free-for-all discussion.
I like that. It ensures everyone gets at least one chance to contribute right from the get-go.
Exactly. They also mention the 5-minute rule, which is kind of an intriguing way to prevent domination.
How does that work?
Basically, no one can speak a second time on a topic until everyone else who wants to has spoken once.
That could really disrupt those patterns where a few individuals tend to just monopolize the airtime.
It really could. And then there's the power of structured brainstorming. This involves getting initial ideas down in writing before any verbal discussion happens.
Okay, writing first.
Yeah, this can be particularly good for individuals who might be more introverted or maybe just need a bit more time to formulate their thoughts. It lets them contribute without that pressure of immediate verbal back and forth.
And progressive stacking, that sounds interesting. Intentionally prioritizing the voices of those who are typically less heard.
Exactly. That requires a very conscious effort from whoever is facilitating or even from the team itself to rebalance the dynamic in real time. Notice who hasn't spoken, invite them in.
The example they give of starting a meeting with, like a period of silent reflection, followed by everyone writing down their initial ideas, that feels so powerful.
It really does.
You might be genuinely surprised by the innovative contributions that pop up from those quieter team members when they're given that initial space to think and contribute in a nonverbal way first.
Totally agree. The second key strategy revolves around something we all do constantly, responding to others. It's about minding your responses.
Minding your responses.
Becoming much more aware of how our reactions can either encourage or, well, discourage future contributions from people.
The classic yes, but immediately springs to mind.
Always.
It sounds so innocuous, right? But it often has the effect of just negating everything that came before it.
Completely. The text suggests consciously replacing it with yes and, which is all about building on ideas, fostering collaboration.
That small shift in language, yes and, instead of yes but, could make a huge difference in the overall feeling, the positivity.
Huge difference, absolutely. They also highlight something called the +10 rule.
+10.
Yeah. When someone offers an idea, intentionally pause for just a brief moment, maybe 10 seconds, before you jump in with your response.
Interesting. Why?
Well, it signals that you're truly considering their input, not just reacting. And it also creates a little space for others to chime in as well before you maybe dominate the response.
I like that. And the idea of actually paying attention to who gets what kind of response, like, are some team members consistently met with immediate critique while others get enthusiastic support?
Yeah, tracking that.
That level of self-awareness, or maybe team awareness, could be incredibly valuable. And explicitly linking ideas back to their originator, saying, building on Maria's earlier point about that's a fantastic way to make sure everyone feels their contributions are actually seen and valued.
Definitely gives credit where it's due. Strategy number 3 is all about actively inviting multiplicity.
Inviting multiplicity.
It's not enough to just sort of hope diverse perspectives surface. You need to proactively go out and solicit them.
So how do you do that?
Well, a simple but really powerful question to ask before making a decision is just, what perspectives might we be missing here?
Opens the door.
It really does. It opens the door for voices or angles that might not otherwise have been heard.
And directly inviting quieter team members, like a simple, Sanjay, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yes. That shows a genuine commitment to inclusivity. It's not just passive waiting. And normalizing the idea of multiple viewpoints, maybe by saying something like, okay, I'd like to hear 3 different ways of looking at this problem.
Setting the expectation.
Exactly. It sets the expectation that diverse opinions aren't just welcome, they're actively sought after.
Oh, okay.
And I particularly appreciate this one. Reframing disagreement as a valuable part of the process.
Instead of something to avoid.
Right. Instead of viewing it as conflict, asking, who sees this differently and what might I be missing? That encourages a more curious, learning-oriented mindset in the team.
The example they give of a product development meeting specifically asking for the customer support perspective after hearing from engineering and marketing,
Yeah, that's a great specific example.
it clearly illustrates how you can proactively seek out those often overlooked but totally critical viewpoints.
Couldn't agree more. The final strategy focuses on ensuring everyone is truly on the same page, and that's through checking for understanding.
Seems basic, but probably overlooked often.
Very often.
Yeah.
This is especially vital in diverse teams where people might come from different backgrounds, have different levels of expertise, or even just different interpretations of common terms.
So practical steps.
Creating shared glossaries for any specialized terminology used within a team or project. That's a very practical first step.
Good idea.
Initiating projects with explicit discussions around the definitions of key terms and concepts. That can head off a lot of misunderstandings later on.
Right. Define success up front.
Exactly. And instead of just a general throw away any questions, try phrasing it as, what aspects of this plan might benefit from some further explanation?
Much more specific.
It's much more specific and frankly more inviting. It gives people permission to ask for clarification without feeling like they're admitting ignorance.
And simply checking assumptions with a phrase like, okay, just to make sure we're all aligned on this, can prevent so many potential issues down the road.
Yeah. The example of a cross-functional initiative taking time at the start to align on a shared definition of customer experience across different departments, sales, support, product.
That's brilliant.
It really is. It seems like a small investment of time up front that can yield huge benefits in effective collaboration and just shared understanding later.
Okay, so beyond these broader strategies, the text also highlights some very specific language shifts, like actual phrases we can swap out.
Yes, moving from tactical strategies to actual words. For instance, shifting from a directive style to a more invitational one.
Give me an example.
Instead of saying, okay, here's what we need to do, try asking, what are some potential approaches we could take here?
Opens it up immediately. Fosters collaboration.
Exactly. And shifting from a tone of certainty to one of curiosity.
Okay.
So instead of a definitive statement like, that won't work because, try framing it more like, I'm curious to explore how we might address the potential challenge of X.
Keeps the door open for problem solving rather than shutting it down.
Right. I also think the suggested shift from binary questions, yes, no, agree, disagree, to more nuanced ones is really valuable.
How so?
Well, instead of asking, do you agree or disagree, try something like, what aspects of this proposal resonate with you, and where do you see potential gaps or areas for improvement?
Gets much more thoughtful, detailed responses that way.
Definitely. Another key shift, moving from general to specific questioning. A broad, any questions, often just gets silence. Right.
Yeah.
But if you ask something like, what specific questions do you have about the implementation timeline we just discussed, you're directing people to a particular area and making it much easier for them to formulate a relevant question.
Makes sense. And finally, shifting from presumptive language
Yeah, that's a big one.
to more exploratory language, instead of assuming agreement with, everyone's comfortable with this plan, right?
Which puts pressure on people to agree.
Right. Try asking, what concerns might we not have surfaced yet about this approach? It creates a much safer space for dissenting opinions or unspoken worries to actually be shared.
All really practical shifts.
This all circles back, doesn't it, to a really critical point. The personal responsibility we each have in shaping these communication dynamics.
Absolutely.
The text emphasizes that creating truly balanced language environments, it really begins with each of us taking an honest look at our own communication habits.
It has to start there. They pose some really insightful, maybe slightly uncomfortable questions for self-reflection.
Such as,
Questions like, whose voices do I naturally tend to amplify in conversations? When do I typically interrupt others, and who am I most likely to interrupt?
ooh, tough ones.
Yeah. Do I find myself responding differently to ideas based purely on who presents them? What specialized language do I use that might inadvertently create barriers for others? And perhaps most importantly, how might my own position or status within a team affect others' willingness to speak openly and candidly with me?
These aren't always easy questions to confront, are they? But they're so essential for growth, for awareness.
Absolutely essential. It's not about assigning blame or feeling guilty. It's really about cultivating greater self-awareness.
Right.
Recognizing our own unconscious patterns gives us the power of the agency to make more intentional choices about how we communicate and interact with others.
And as the text wisely points out, exceptional leaders are often those who make these patterns conscious.
Yes. They make them conscious, and they actively work to shift them towards greater balance and inclusivity. It's a deliberate practice.
So ultimately, as Phoenix Performance Partner so clearly articulates, effective communication is really about creating possibility.
Possibility, I like that word here.
Yeah, creating the possibility for the best ideas to emerge no matter where they come from.
And the possibility for diverse perspectives to actually strengthen our decisions rather than just complicate them.
And it's fundamentally about creating the possibility for every single member of a team to realize their full potential and contribute their unique talents.
Couldn't have said it better.
And when you think about today's incredibly competitive landscape where human capital people are such a critical differentiator,
Absolutely critical.
the organizations that can truly tap into the full spectrum of talent and perspectives within their walls, those are the ones that are ultimately going to thrive and lead, aren't they?
No question about it. And it truly all begins with fostering language that genuinely invites all voices to the table and ensures everyone feels valued and actually heard.
A powerful foundation.
So listener, as you head into your next meeting, your next team interaction, maybe even your next family dinner, I encourage you to consider this powerful final thought from the source material.
Okay, leave us with this.
What specific language pattern will you consciously choose to shift in your next conversation to create more space for all voices to be heard? It's a profound question to carry with you, and maybe a fantastic starting point for putting these valuable insights into action today.